Hello, and welcome to this ARA webinar with staff from Kincannon and Reed. Today's webinar is titled Human Capital is a Competitive Advantage, Aligning Leadership to Win in Agriculture's Structural Shift. In this webinar, Aaron Locker of Kincannon and Reed will provide simple, practical frameworks that ag retail leaders can implement immediately to strengthen their leadership bench, improve retention, and make better hiring decisions. My name is Hunter Carpenter, Senior Director of Government Affairs for ARA, and I'll introduce our webinar speaker in just a bit. But first, I'll go over a few housekeeping items so you know what to expect. Webinars are an important part of the ARA professional development pathway and provide a great opportunity for ARA member companies to help educate their employees. Today's webinar will be recorded and added to the member-only ARA dashboard section of our website. As a reminder, you can log in to the dashboard to access past webinar recordings at any time. And if you do not have an ARA login, you can email info@aradc.org to set one up. Questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation, but you can type them into the chat panel at any time. With that out of the way, I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Aaron Locker. Aaron is a seasoned agribusiness leader and strategist with over 35 years of experience driving growth and innovation across global agricultural markets. His career spans leadership roles at Syngenta, FMC, Vivid Life Sciences, and Helm Agro US, where he advanced both traditional and biological crop solutions. Now managing director at Kincannon and Reed, the only global executive search firm focused on the food and ag value chain, he helps organizations attract and develop transformative leaders. And Aaron holds a BS in agricultural economics from the Ohio State University and has completed executive education at Wharton and Harvard Business Schools. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Aaron. Take it away.
Thanks, Hunter. And obviously, thanks for the using the at Ohio State. Thanks everybody for coming and appreciate ARA, the relationship we have with ARA in trying to bring some more value to retailer members. We talk a lot about technology and the changing dynamics of agriculture. One of the things that we don't talk maybe enough about is the human element of it. So that's what we want to do today. Is really come with some practical things that you as in retailers can look at as you start to plan what's next for your businesses. And I always start with what's going on, today. I mean, I think as you see in this slide, the new rules of competition in agriculture. I mean, I really believe that we are at an inflection point. Going from things like yield maximization to margin optimization. You think about it in terms of production agriculture. I used to coach my teams when I was in the biological space for a little bit. In that, we've proven we can grow 600 bushel corn, and yet our national trend line yield is 179, 180. And so, the next wave is not necessarily more genetics. We have the genetics out there. We need to get more of the genetic potential. And that's leading into going from scale, just trying to grow more acres to really capability and trying to get the most out of every acre. And we've always thought of agriculture as a cyclical business, right? I was reading an article not too long ago. It's talking about the normal cycles of agriculture. Take about 6 years going into the bottom and then 4 years coming back out. But what's going on today? I think all of us can agree. It's starting to feel more structural. Things are hanging around. You're going to more precision over volume, more biologicals being the mainstream. Of course, the rise of integrated platforms to try to get all the disparate data that we have and convert that into knowledge. And I think those are just a few of the examples of why not only this is a structural change in agriculture, but it begs the question, so what does that mean for leadership? What does that mean for all of us as we continue to lead our organizations to the next wave over the next 3 to 5 years? Next. So a couple things, and go ahead and click it again, Hunter. Again, as I look and you talk about leadership, it requires a leadership profile is changing. We can talk a little bit about what as we work with clients, finding that next leader for an organization. even those questions are starting to change in terms of what leaders are looking for or what companies are looking for in their next leaders. Capability gaps, are widening because again, with all this structural change, traditionally ag has always been what I would call we stay in our lanes, our disciplines, right? We are career salespeople or operations people or what have you. And now we're asking our leaders and our people to wear many hats. And so you're starting to see some gaps. I think today also you look at just the pace of change, and we see leadership transitions are increasing and getting much more riskier in terms of trying to find those right leaders. And then lastly, I'm a firm believer. I think the next wave that's in front of us, it's all going to be about how do we execute? How do we get our teams aligned to execute the plans that we put in place that helps our businesses grow over the next 3 to 5 years? Next. So three questions that matter, and I think pathways to solve. And this is really the heart of what I'm going to be going over the next, say 10, 15 minutes. Number one, what leadership do you need going forward? And so we'll talk a little bit about really analyzing those talent gaps that you have, and not necessarily analyzing them for today, but analyzing them for where we think the business is going to be over the next 2 to 3 years. That then goes into, once we got that gap analysis, if you will, then it's, do we have the right leaders, the right skill set to be able to deliver on the things that's going to impact our business over the next 3 years. And then thirdly, if there are some gaps, maybe sometimes we need to go on the outside. Sometimes it's nothing more than just getting some fresh perspectives on the teams. Other times it's going after specific disciplines or experiences, skill sets that the business is going to require in the future. So how do we get better at, just the whole recruitment side of it as well? So that's the three things that we're going to hopefully come away with some practical things for all of you to put in place. Next. So if you look at the talent gap analysis, and this is the problem, the thing that I see, and again, all of this, I not only see it today in my work at Kincannon and Reed, but from 35 years in the industry, I'll have to confess I was one of these problems. We've all had successes and things that we wish we would have done differently, and so that's where a lot of this comes from. Some tried and true things, even from my own leadership journey. But I think the problem when people are looking at what type of talent is the business going to need, they look at it in terms of today, right? They look at it in terms of, well, we've got these roles, we've got these functions. We've got these, job descriptions that we've used forever. And the problem is we're not looking to where the business is going to be. The old Wayne Gretzky quote, right? What did it make him? He was so successful. He skated to where the puck was going to be. And I think as businesses and business leaders, that's what we need to be able to do, is say, when we're doing our strategic plans for, if you will, of 3 to 4 to some cases 5 years out, what is the business going to look like? How's it going to change? What's the market? What are the growers, the changing needs of the growers in the retail space? And so what do we look like? And then and that's really the shift, is starting with those future needs versus current day. And then from there, defining what leadership looks like. If these are the things, if you've gone through your strategic planning process, and it's that 2 to 3 year business changes, if you will, that you've teed up and said, this is what our customers are saying, this is what our competitors are doing, this is what the geopolitical landscape we think is maybe looking like. If you have an answer to that, good for you. But here's just a list of things that's going to impact the business. And then, so what do we got to be able to do to stay ahead of that? And then you start to assess your current capabilities with those future needs. Because if there are going to be maybe some skill sets that you're going to need that you don't necessarily have today, the next thing, and we'll get into it in the next section, is development. Can I develop from within? Ideally, that sends a great message to the organization. But you can't really do that unless you've done this work in your talent gap analysis to understand where are the gaps that I have. And so from there, you walk away with those clear leadership gaps. Maybe it's skill set gaps. And then you start to prioritize actions on how am I going to close that gap? Do I build from within? Do I go out and attract? I think AI, digital fluency, is one area that's getting a lot of play right now. That as I talked about before, the the decision platforms that are emerging. Do we have the right people to manage and grow those effectively and meet the needs of our changing needs of our growers?
Aaron, quick question, and this might
Yeah.
help inform our attendees on some questions that they might be able to ask later on. But what leadership capabilities are companies underestimating today that will matter the most over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
That's a good question. As you can imagine, in my business, we're working with clients with companies across the food and ag space, and I see those when they're asking them, they start off and say, "I need to fill this role." Maybe it's a new CEO, CFO, what have you. Whereas before, it was pretty standard. You kind of, if they were saying that, you knew what they were talking about. Now those conversations have really diversified into a lot of different areas. Um, some of the things from a leadership standpoint, top three things that I hear consistently. I need leaders that are emotionally intelligent, self-aware, that they're better able to deal with ambiguity. They are resilient. They get their team, they got a vision. They get their teams aligned with that vision and cascade that into what that actually means for the individuals, doing the work. So I think the leadership is number one still. I think number two, close to that, and I mentioned before, digital fluency. With AI and other technologies, the skill sets over the next 3 to 5 years are going to be not necessarily we need Microsoft people working at our shops, right? We need what we do need is people that can have an understanding and start to connect the dots and what that means for your individual business, and then be able to pull in resources, and possibly even new skill sets into the team to be able to further tease that out and implement it. So those are a couple things that I see when I'm talking with clients. So let's get into development. So now you've identified here are the gaps that I have. And but now let's think about what we do or maybe don't do in terms of leadership development. I was at a conference last fall. It was Crop Life, and it was the same theme. I was talking to all different types of industry leaders. All of them were saying the same thing. They said that from a team standpoint, they feel pretty good about their leadership teams. Now, granted, many of them are saying they're going to have to get ahead of a lot of the retirements that are going to be coming over the next couple of years, but they feel pretty good about those. They actually feel pretty good about their bench. But what kept them up at night was they don't know if their bench is necessarily ready to jump into that leadership role. And I think a little bit of that, speaks to it's become an industry problem. I started my career with Ciba Geigy. And in those days, we were constantly going through leadership training, sales training, something, every meeting, every year. And then I feel like as an industry, we kind of got away from that a little bit. And I think that's some of the things that describe, now I'm starting to see companies put a renewed focus on leadership. And so it's twofold. Number one, how do I grow the team that I have? But then two, make it a part of my system where I identified, like I said in the last slide, I identified my talent gap analysis, and then identified who are the people that could logically go into those roles that, with some development, can be successful. Because the other thing I think we've seen this happen quite a bit. What you get the deal of how's come my top salesperson turns out not to be my best sales manager. And I would contend it's twofold. Number one, many cases we don't do enough pre-development or enough development before we move our people into the next role. And so that all of a sudden the person just gets tapped, they go right in that next role, and then we wonder why there's a period of struggle. And in some cases, we even lose some people that way too because they become frustrated. So I think getting ahead of having that planned effort on here's where I think based on your career path and what the business needs, where you can get to now, and here's the skill sets and the attributes of what's going to be needed for that role. Here's where you're at. And so now let's put the development plan together so we can bring you along so that when and if we get to that point, you're ready to go. And so I think that forces you to do a couple of things too. It forces you also to identify those high potential performers that are going to be that taking that leap into management at someday. And then from a development standpoint, I've seen companies start to adopt a lot of different things in terms of programs, and could be things on challenging projects. In some cases, I'm starting to see even more people. Maybe it's a salesperson, and they say, you know what, because of where you want to go in your career, what the business needs, I'm going to take you out of that and maybe put you into an operational function for a period of time, just so you can get that and get embedded and get that learning. The whole thing really, then whatever direction you take, make sure there's a good coaching cadence so that it's not just like, okay, you go off and prosper and I'll see you in a couple of years. It's got to be part of a program, if you will, of coaching on what have you learned, and then you as a manager helping that person grow by giving them real world feedback and timely feedback as well. That does two things in the end. That builds obviously your stronger bench so that it doesn't keep you up at night, like my example. And then the other thing, don't underestimate the power of development that has on retention. And especially those of you that have more and more millennials and other younger folks coming out of college, they're demanding to see what their career path looks like and to have that development plan, to see that they're going, somewhere, as opposed to when I started, here's the keys, here's your territory, go at it. So that's some of the things they're changing too.
Aaron, one thing that I've heard from some of our members are that, maybe they've promoted strong performers into leadership roles within their companies, but the results have sort of been mixed. What should they be looking for early on to know if someone will truly succeed as a leader?
Yeah, I think that, and that's a good question, especially now that we went through the first two sections, because what they should be looking for, first of all, they should know what they're looking for. And what I mean by that is when you do that talent gap analysis, you know what skill sets you're going to need. And then secondly, then you look at your talent pool that you have and say who's most likely or who's the closest to that in the skill sets that are going to be required to be able to move into that position with some development. And because that's why I mentioned the example that I did, in that, how come our top salesman doesn't turn out to be our top sales leader or manager. And in many cases, it's that anticipating, what it is, but then, or what's going to be required. But then, but like I said, have that really open and honest conversation about where it is that the employee wants to go in their career path. And then if they want to assume to that management position, then have an open conversation about here's what's required, here's where you're at, and here are the things that we're going to work on together to get you there. And I think that heads off more than anything, heads off at the pass of just moving somebody into the next role and expecting they're gonna flourish when in all actuality they start to flounder. Okay. Just a couple of things on succession planning, because I really want to. This is a topic as I work with and our team works with clients. We've got a platform called K&R Edge, which is a whole suite of leadership development services, from executive coaching, leadership team assessments. Succession planning has been probably the biggest key topic recently, and it's because we're all aging out. As I look at a lot of the crop input, companies and leadership teams and all the changes going on there, many people could be retired in the next 2, 3 years. And so think about succession planning is really as much about not only building your bench, and having a plan for when somebody retires or somebody moves on. But it also, don't underestimate how much confidence that builds in your existing team when they see you having that plan, from a succession, and take it from what it used to be, which is, hey, if I get hit by a bus, here's the person that's going to take my role, to more of a thoughtful approach where you have maybe 2 or 3 different people that could do your role, and now you've got that development plan that you're working with them to get there. When people see that, and make it visible, but when people see that, it builds confidence. And also for you as a business leader, you now are identifying what are those critical roles as I look out 3 to 5 years. What are those roles that if I lose somebody literally tomorrow, that could have some serious negative impact on the business? And do I have a plan for that? And then, like I said before, it's the creating those development roadmaps that brings your team along with you and energizes them too, because what that says to your organization is it's a growing organization because we're planning out and we're resourcing accordingly. Next. The other thing, lastly, on retention is again, when people generally stay, when they see that path. And again, the younger the generation that you have working for you, the more they're going to want to see that. We see very often, again, I mentioned K&R Edge. We see very often on also applying some executive coaching or some type of coaching, independent, let's say, along with that. It's a safe space for the employee that says, well, here's where I'm driving to, and have somebody to bounce off, ideas with, and really explore on what they could be doing. Of course, with technology, I'm even seeing a reason. We talk about mentorships, and I always encourage companies to do that. Have that senior leader, mentor some of your younger staff. And I've even, because of technology, have seen reverse mentorship, where you have a younger person that is much more versed in technology and chances are AI than the senior leader is. That goes both ways. And what a healthy relationship that is when you set that up. But bottom line, start simple. Don't try to eat the elephant in one bite. Start simple and then let that build momentum. And you'll actually find your organization starts to come up with better ideas to make those programs even more meaningful. Next. Lastly, talent attraction. So again, you've assessed your business. Where is it going? You've identified talent gaps. You've got your development plan, and invariably, because of retirements or because of people leaving for other opportunities, you're going to need to attract talent. And let's face it, agriculture it's getting more competitive because of all the retirements, and harder to find good talent that is willing to stay and has the skill sets that many organizations are looking for. So what I always coach clients on is don't rely on the job description of the current. Again, have that position description of where the business is going, and be clear about what a success looks like. That's the number one question that I get from candidates that I'm trying to attract into organizations is, what does success look like? Years 1, years 3. And so you're gonna need to have that. And the other thing too, rather than just your standard job description, make it outcome based. Define the business problem or opportunity first. What do you want this? Yeah, it's a sales manager, but what do you want this salesperson to achieve? And then that's going to help you try to understand what the type of individual and skill set that you're looking for. Um, the other thing I coach clients on is again, once you've done your strategic plan and you've identified those high impact roles, those ones that, as I mentioned, would be incredibly difficult to replace if one just up and left on you. Um, Make sure that you have a strong EVP or what that stands for is an employee value proposition. Don't underestimate that people today, that much more than again when I started in the industry, they're going, and I hear it more often. They're generally working. They want to work for a culture. Some cases they want to work for a person that they respect. Um, Much more than again when many of us started in the industry, you just went to work for a company and you didn't know where your territory was going to be, but you just knew that hey, that's where I'm going to go, and we'll see where the path goes. So your employee value proposition is all around your values, your culture, what you stand for, what your success measures, where are you driving in the marketplace. Simon Sinek talks about defining your what, and so when you start to try to attract talent from the outside, be very clear about that, and in some cases get ready that because again the talent landscape is tightening, be ready for with a plan to, in some cases, go outside the industry. What you'll find, you'll definitely get that fresh perspective. You may even get some unique skill sets that are imperative for your business growth. But what that entails is get ready because it means your onboarding has to be even better. And because again, you bring in this very, very capable, intelligent, smart person, and then you drop them into ag, and they don't anticipate the cyclical nature of ag and everything and the heavy relationship side of the business, and I've seen some of them struggle. However, with a good onboarding plan that eases them into the both the business as well as the ag culture in general and helps them to be more effective. And so you're really then attracting more higher impact hires, and also you'll find that they're better aligned for quicker results as well.
Aaron, you spoke a little bit about going outside of the business or going externally to find these talent pools. When they do go external, how do folks balance ag retail industry experience with broader leadership capabilities?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a line of questioning that we go through with every search engagement. You ultimately get to trade-offs, right? Um, in some cases, you may attract a diverse candidate pool, which is what you want, right? You want to see what's out there and really find the best fit. And so, but what happens is, when you go outside of agriculture, you get that skill set, but you just need to make sure that it's eyes wide open for them, coming in. And so to be able to attract that, that's where you get into that employee value proposition and so on, so that your story, your elevator speech, is ready and resonates with the people that you want to attract. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, great.
Okay. Okay, good. So, again, we definitely, Hunter and I wanted to take, some more time, for questions. So let me wrap this up. And then there's just one thing that, will be my give back moment as things that I've learned since I've been with Concannon and Reed. But what we've talked about just over the last 20 minutes or 25 minutes, um, is talk to your HR folks, or even if you're HR folks, start to think in terms, talk to your leadership about what's our leadership system. How do we turn this from an art to a science, and how we attract, develop, and grow talent that's going to grow our business, and go from reactive to intentional, and answer the questions, what do I need? How do I build it?
And in some cases, how do I go on the outside to attract it? And so it really, in my mind, it's all around defining the future state, having a robust plan to build it internally, and then add it externally where you need it. Okay. Next. And that's the other thing. I'll go back. A quote that I thought, was resonated with me. It's, the companies that'll win will be the ones with the best plan. Will not be the ones with the best plan, but with the ones with the best people to align it. And there's a lot of truth in that. I've seen people build the best looking strategy. When I was head of marketing for FMC, I had, a product manager that, I mean, it was always buttoned up, and he was a smart individual, but for whatever reason, it never translated into results. And so I think making sure, don't just rely on, okay, I spent the time to go through my strategic plan and I feel good about that and where the business can be. Make sure your best people are aligned with it as well. Next. Okay, I got a question the other day, and a person asked me. They said, "Okay, since you've been with Kincannon, you've been in the business a long time. Since you've been with Kincannon and Reed, what have you learned?" And I had to think for a little bit, but I think, and the first thing that came to mind was brand thyself. It's your own brand. This quote: "Brand yourself for the career you want, not the job that you have." And this is something that I didn't necessarily learn quick enough, maybe adapted later in life. But the reason why I bring it up is because, not that I'm advocating all of you on this call go out and look for a job tomorrow, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is, again, it gets back to ag is under structural change, like a lot of industries. And so companies are going to be looking for those leaders that are those visionaries that can, get them to a path to prosperity, to calmer waters. And you want to be that brand in that organization or across the industry that people look to. Next. So the advantage there is, like I said before, that the talent competition is increasing, the leadership demand is rising, and I see the people that are really good at building their own brand, are much more in a better position to rise, within organizations. And I'm not talking about the people, and we probably worked with them. I'm not talking about the smartest people in the room or the loudest people in the room. I'm talking about the people that have consciously managed their careers, and learned as much as they can, have experience, a wide range of experience, and really bring a lot of different perspectives to some of the age-old problems that we have and some of the new problems that we have. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about building your personal brand, and then how the market understands, your impact, your deliverables. It's one thing to say, I went to a Harvard seminar. It's another thing to say, what have you done with it? And how have you shown an impact with that? Next. So I tell everybody, build your brand intentionally. What do you want to be known for? And in terms of, you want to be that thought leader. You want to be that, hey, if it's a operations, issue, that's the go-to person. Or a business issue, I go to that person because they've done a little bit in marketing, in sales, in operations, in supply chain, different things like that. So, when you're thinking about your brand, what do you want it to be known for? And that helps you formulate, okay, what do I need to do to be able to realize that? The other thing is consistency, showing up the same way every day. In uncertain times like this, it's very easy to get caught up in the moment, caught up in the fire of the day. And that's when I talk about emotionally intelligent leaders are the ones that are very self-aware, and they do show up every day, and they're open and they listen, and they ask questions. That's, and be that consistent version of yourself every day. And then lastly, visibility, making your impact, understood. And that's not just, I'm not saying, beating your own drum, every day, but definitely making sure that you're including people in your journey, because then other people see what you've been able to do. And you've got two things. One, that becomes known in the organization. And two, you're bringing people along. And that's why I end with that Jack Welch quote. Before you're a leader, success is all about growing yourself. When you become a leader, success is all about growing others. And I think that's the thing that I think we all are in and love agriculture, is because of our service to others, service to growers, service to each other on our teams, and helping each other grow. There's an old South African term called Ubuntu, which is loosely translated, "I am because you are." So never underestimate the power that you have on others and the power that others have on you and your growth in your leadership journey. Next. So that's it. We've got a little bit of time for questions. I don't know, Hunter, if you've gotten any questions, or we can certainly open it up to the audience.
We don't have any so far, but I did have a little technical difficulty. I think I've opened up the chat function to everyone so people can post questions in the chat. And as they're doing that, I've got a couple that I've thought of along the way that might help spur others to get involved and ask some questions here of you.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of go back to some of the different sections that you talked about. So bear with me. When talking about talent gap analysis, what's a practical way to evaluate a company's leadership team against future strategies and customer needs, for that matter?
Right.
Not just what's required today.
Okay, so question was practical's way to audit your existing team. So what we normally do as part of K&R Edge is we'll start with that leadership team assessment, and when presented in the right way, that could be a powerful thing, because again, it shows maybe the CEO or senior leader, they want to invest in their people, but to do that, you got to know where everybody's at. And then you also got to, like, as I said before, understand and get alignment around where's the business going. And that then starts to become clear. And then it's the other things that I've always used in terms of identifying where may I have a gap. And the gap is not necessarily should be viewed as a negative. It could be just a learning issue. It's as I mentioned, from a marketing perspective, how's come, we get good products and we're getting ready to launch them, but it never lives up to this potential. Is that an R&D issue, or maybe it's a go-to-market issue that we need to lean into a little bit more with marketing? Did we understand the market? I'd even go all the way up to the CEO or the general manager. If they're the ones getting calls from customers, getting calls from suppliers, direct calls, and that's happened quite a bit. Even a CEO starts to have to ask himself the question, have I empowered my team enough? Other functions, maybe even your CFO, look at your, accounts receivable. I think there was one statistics that I saw, not too long ago, that's growers, right, over the last through 2023, we're carrying about 5% operating debt. Now that's up to about 31%. And so, think of it in terms of, is it just a cyclical nature, or is it really that structural thing that my CFO needs to get ahead of? So looking at and just asking yourself questions by functions, but then I think it is impactful to do a leadership team assessment as part of your own business growth plan.
Here's another question. How do you approach a C-suite search differently than a mid-level?
There's a lot of similarities and some differences. C-suite search, again, there's probably more what I would call more layers, in that, because let's face it, you take a CEO of 10 years ago, maybe had 4 or 5 things that they really had to have their pulse on any given point in time. Now that's double digits. And so it takes, we spend a lot more time on senior leaders because of their impact, high impact on the organization to really get right, all of the attributes, the skill sets needed, the where's your business going and how do you ensure the right fit? Because on those high impact roles, it is critical, and it's getting more critical that companies spend the time, get the right resources, and hire right the first time. Because otherwise, a senior leader, the wrong senior leader, has a tremendously negative impact on the organization. Now, having said that, now let's go down to the, say the director level or even lower levels. We go through the same process regardless. I mean, it's at the end of the day, each role has with it, it's the skill set that we're trying to attract based on where the business is going. And also the attributes, the experiences. I tend probably when it gets to that level, that's when I turn it into more of a basketball analogy, right? You need to look for somebody that's going to fill that role and be very effective at it. But you're also building a team. And if you use a basketball analogy, you don't need a team full of all guards or all forwards or all centers. You want to look, diagonally, if you will, or multi-level, if you will, to say I need the right talent to do the job. But then I look at my team and say I need to have differences there that complement each other. And that's where I see probably spending more time at a mid-level, role versus the senior level.
So, one more quick question on talent gap. If I'm a CEO and I want a quick reality check, what are the clearest signs that I have a leadership gap that I'm not fully seeing yet?
I think that's similar in some of the things that I said, I think on your last question, maybe, if I'm hearing that right, because as a senior leader, I tend to ask a lot more questions when I was, holding executive roles. I would seek out and make sure that I was asking not only questions of, maybe direct reports, and again, you can do it in the right way, right? How's things going? How are you feeling? What do you think the vision is? Where do you think the organization's going? Try to make sure that those messages that you thought as a senior leader, everybody heard, but maybe, you needed your mid-level managers to inculcate them throughout the organization. I talk to customers, how are my people showing up? So I tend to, coach people on asking as many questions, a lot of questions as possible to a variety of different groups. And many times you'll start to hear patterns that then you can say, okay, here's something that I can work on. As opposed to generalities, which really it doesn't help the employee out. And because let's face it, it's in your best interest to grow that employee into something that is going to help the organization and the person at the same time.
Okay, just a reminder, the chat panel and Q&A function are both open. I'm going to go back to leadership development as folks are thinking of questions. What's one thing that companies can start doing immediately to improve their leadership readiness without building a formal program?
Yeah, I think it's in the identification standpoint. Identify what you want and what the business is needing, and then make it personal. Make it the more, and I see companies, larger companies especially, and I think they're getting better at it. But I saw them move some years back to more online training, which maybe for some functional things is good, but don't rely on that as, okay, that's my leadership program, and expect to see, greater results. It's got to be personalized and both for the business as well as the individual. And so that's why I say, what can I start doing now? And I know it's warm and we're getting ready to get out in the field and we're going to be tied up for the next couple of months. What I would ask all of you as you start to move into, okay, what does my 2027 plan look like? Start asking yourself and your leadership team those questions. What do we think the business is going to be in the next 3 to 5 years? What are the headwinds and opportunities that we're going to have? What are growers going to be requiring? What are competitors we think going to be doing? And really have a robust framework of here's what we see our business looking like. And then have that next question or two of what skill set do we need? Because then that's going to help you then immediately go into development and saying who in our team has those skill sets with a little bit of development to get there. And or are we going to need to go on the outside?
And again, on the development side, what are some red flags that you see when a company says they have a strong succession plan, but in reality, you don't see that?
That's a great question. So I always ask, I said, okay, you got a succession plan. That's fantastic. You're already probably well ahead of a lot of companies. Tell me how many people you have identified for each of those high impact roles. Or maybe it's even before that. Have you identified, you got a succession plan. Now you've got it for every role. Have you identified what your high impact roles are? Again, those ones that if I lose that person tomorrow, that's going to be some serious pain on the organization. And then have you gotten identified at least two, if not three people that can move into those roles? And not to turn it into a competition, but what you find in the development process is people find out more about themselves as well. And maybe they started off saying, yes, I want to be that marketing manager, sales manager, marketing director, what have you. But I got into my development plan and actually, you know what? I'm kind of liking operations a lot better, or customer service, or what have you. And so by having multiple people identified, you have a greater chance of developing that talent from within. And so when the time is ready, they can move right in there, and that's what you want. Again, like I said before, don't wait on the promotion to start the development plan.
And let's move over to the talent attraction portion if we can. Independent ag retailers often can't compete on compensation with some of the larger organizations. What actually attracts high quality leaders to these roles?
Um, that gets into how strong is your employee value proposition. Um, and let's face it, we've all faced that before, where we feel like, um, we want that high quality, high impact talent, but don't know if we can afford them. Well, don't underestimate yourself. And it's what I said earlier is it's changing. The talent landscape is changing. Don't underestimate that people, especially younger people, are looking for a culture they want to work for or in. Maybe a person they want to work for. There's much more purpose. What's my what of this organization? What's my purpose? What's my reason for being? And formulate that into your employee value proposition, because what I've seen more often than not is that's what, and it's not even younger people. I'm even starting to see mid-career people say, you know what? I just want to have fun. I want to work for a group of people, or with a group of people that want to have fun and move the business in a positive direction, and not, versus the daily grind. And I think if you can build that culture, that is worth a ton when it comes to, compensation. And or let's put it this way, it's that breaking point. Yes, I may be making a little bit more over on with this offer, but with your offer, that intrigues me. That culture intrigues me. The leadership seems sound and personable, and that's I want to have a quality of life, and that's who I want to work for.
Another question. When a long tenured senior manager steps back or retires, what happens to the customer and key relationships that that person built and held, and how can the company prepare in retaining those?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've seen it too, haven't we? Many cases, especially I've seen it a lot of times in retailer space more than anything. You have that founder, that general manager that's been there forever. That's the go-to people. He's got the relationships with the largest growers that you're servicing. But then what happens when he leaves and you've got this gap? And so I would approach it two ways. One, it should be part, again, I sound like a broken record, but it should be part of your development program. Um, you should know that if that senior leader, that general manager, let's say, is going to be retiring in the next 3 years, start to have a plan now. Start to have that as part of that succession plan, those people identified, making more joint calls with that general manager, being more involved in those conversations around the kitchen table with the growers, and so that they have a chance to start to develop that relationship. I was at a conference, a MACA conference last fall, and we had a grower from Indiana, and he said something I thought was really insightful. He said, and he's the dad, right? But he's got the son that's going to be taken over. And he said, we as older, growers, put a heavy emphasis on relationships. And we feel like the younger generation doesn't do that as much. And his point to me as a grower was, don't underestimate that. He says, my son, my daughter wants to have those go-to people, those go-to relationship just as much. And but those need to be fostered, and they need to be identified early enough that you can foster them, so that when the transition happens, you never skip a beat.
All right. Well, last call for questions. I see that Aaron has included his contact information on this final slide. Please feel free to reach out to him if you're interested in taking advantage of their services at Kincannon and Reed. We want to thank Aaron for his time today, and also thank all of you for attending. It's not lost on us that this is a very busy part of the year. And we want to make sure that we thank you for your participation despite your busy schedules. So thanks everyone for attending, and we'll stay on for just a bit if you have any questions for Aaron off the record.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and this was something too. I might say, Hunter, and again, thanks to Hunter for helping put this together. Yeah, Hunter and I have been I don't know how many of you have been to some of the other webinar series on talent, but Hunter's been great to work with as ARA, because and I would encourage all of you, if you want to know more, or is there something specific to maybe some of the challenges that you see, we're always looking for topics. And so that could be for another webinar. After we get through the busy season and everything else, maybe we pick this back up in the fall to bring more value to ARA members.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Aaron, and thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.